there's no paper, there's no planning. And again, I present to you the idea, the imagination. They dreamt this. They had a dream, they saw the picture in their heads, then they went and drew this in a cave because they wanted to express themselves. They wanted to leave a legacy. They wanted to leave a memory. There's a calling in you to be creative and to be imaginative. Okay? All right. So, and you can see there's a lot of diversity. This is a story, right? Because you have these horses, but then you have these predators, lions. Okay? So this picture is telling a mythology. It's telling a story of how nature works. Okay? So people are observing nature, and what they see is a cycle of life and death, of destruction and renewal. We're all together. We're all unified. We're all one. It's balance and harmony. And that's why if you were to kill these animals, you also had to commemorate them. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? Because this is a world of balance and harmony. If you kill these animals and you eat their food, you must thank them for their sacrifice by commemorating them. It's the same thing as later on, when humans fight in battles, we build monuments to celebrate those who were fallen, right? Because we want to create balance and harmony in the world. We want to commemorate those who made our lives possible. Okay? So in this world, what matters are these animals, because these animals are what gives humans food and clothing. Okay? Okay, you can see how beautiful these pictures are. Like, do you see how lifelike the animals are? Okay, so clearly, we humans had all this creative potential back then. All right. Okay, this is in Spain, in Altamira. This is a bison, and you can see the red ochre, how beautiful it is, okay? Okay. And you can see how it's not meant to be realistic. It's meant to be surreal. It's meant almost to be a mythology. There's a story being told in these pictures. We don't know what the story is, but you can imagine that there's a story of life and death, destruction and renewal. Okay, and you can see the struggle of humanity to get food from nature, but also a willingness to celebrate those who have fallen. And there's religious significance to everything, these cave paintings. How do we know? Because this is clearly a shaman, right? What we call a leopard man. This dates back to 40,000 years in Germany. So we believe that in the early societies, these shamans were the leaders because they had the most wisdom, because they had a connection to the divine. Also, what's really important is that music, okay, this instrument, was really important to these civilizations. Now, there's a lot of mystery as to how we first spoke. And as I said, actually, we don't really need to speak because we can all understand each other. So why do we speak? Because we want to sing. Okay, does that make sense? Singing, creating music, was a way to express ourselves in the same way as painting was. And music, once you add words, it becomes storytelling. And that's why we created language. Okay? Not for economic reasons, not in order to create a hierarchy, but for creative reasons, to celebrate our humanity together. And these pictures, as you can see, there are religious elements, okay? So you can see how there are two almost bird figures. And back then, the birds signify Mother Earth, okay? So the bird figure is very important. And you can see almost like the bird figures are leading the animals, herding the animals across. So then ask yourself, why are these paintings appearing in caves? Well, for these people, they all believed that nature was connected, right? And the spirit world and material world were connected together. So the question then is, how does the spirit world connect with the material world? Well, through caves, right? Through portals, rivers, caves, mountaintops. And that's why these places were considered appropriate sites for religious ritual. Okay? And that's why you painted these pictures in caves, because these caves, it's almost like you're summoning the spirit of these animals to return, right? You've killed these animals. How do you get them to return? By calling for them in these caves. All right? So as you can see, it's a complex but a complete mythology of how the world works. And for them, this was very, very real. Okay? And you can see how these shamans would actually turn themselves into these beasts in order to better communicate with them. Okay? Because these beasts, these animals, these bisons, were the basis for all life on Earth. If you didn't have them, then you would die off. So you dressed up like them in order to better communicate with them in the spirit world to draw them back. Okay? Okay, so this is another religious depiction. All right, so these cave paintings, there's always 3 questions associated with these cave paintings. The first is, how are they painting caves? What are they painting, and where and why are they doing this? Okay, and I've explained to you. There is religious significance to what they're doing. They're trying to complete the cycle of life and death. If you kill an animal, you have to thank the animal. Okay, you do that by making a religious sacrifice. Okay, by making a religious ritual. What are they painting? They're painting the story of life itself, right? They're trying to paint a picture of how life works. A cycle of death and life, destruction and renewal. And everything's connected together. The stars, the caves are portals into the spirit world. And that's why you celebrate them. Okay? And how are they painting the caves? They're painted together and they're using red ochre and charcoal. What's most important is that because these caves actually lack oxygen, when they're painting these paintings, it's almost like they're in a trance state. Okay, does that make sense? Because you don't have enough to breathe. So it's almost like you're on the precipice, the edge of life and death. And it's almost as though you are actually communicating with the spirit world as you're doing this. So it's all divine inspiration, all divine intuition, okay? So what they believe is that when they paint, they're channeling the power of the spirit world. It's not about us using our experience to paint. It's we are channeling actually the divine when we do so. Okay, and the same thing when we sing or when we tell stories. We're not doing this out of our own will. We are only a portal or a mechanism or a channel for the divine to communicate with everyone else. Okay, so does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right. The other thing that's really interesting about these cave paintings is we find symbols inside these cave paintings. So this is Genevieve von Pitziger, who is a Canadian archaeologist. And she spent decades going to different caves in Europe, and she cataloged all the different symbols. Okay? So these are not pictures, they're symbols. And as you can see, there's a lot of them. Okay? So why would they have these symbols? And also what's interesting is, if you think about it, this is a writing system. In other words, they have the capacity to write, but they chose not to write. Why? Because if you think about it, in this world, writing is a corruption, right? When you speak, you're channeling the divine. So when you are writing something down, you're actually counterfeiting the divine. Okay? Also, remember that for them, talking is really like singing, right? And you cannot capture music in the written form. So it's almost like a corruption of the song. Okay? And also, for them, this is really important. Everything is meant to be a communal experience. When you sing, when you talk, when you paint, we do it together. Okay? But when you write, it's a solitary experience. And that's why, even though we humans, from a very, right from the beginning, we have the capacity to write, we chose not to write. Okay, this is really important for us to understand. Writing was a conscious decision. It was not a technology that was invented later on. We just chose not to do it because we thought it was a corruption of the natural world. Okay? All right? Does that make sense? Okay? So this is a These are all the geometric signs of Ice Age Europe. It's very similar to alchemy, okay? Alchemy is trying to figure out the secrets of the universe. So the question then is, where do they get these signs? And the answer, of course, is it came to them in a dream, or they were inspired with these signs. Okay? This is a world of inspiration, of intuition, of imagination. It's not something that's deliberate. They don't plan this out, they don't discuss it. It just comes to them. And when they draw it out, it makes sense to people. Oh, I know what this means. Okay? All right? So let's summarize, okay? Why are there symbols in art? Well, because there's certain abstractions, certain concepts you cannot draw out, right? So for example, energy is a very important concept. Life force, cycle, repetition. Well, then you have to use symbols in order to express these ideas if you want to tell the story, okay? Second is you are trying to visualize the language of the spirit world, okay? So the spirit world is talking to you, but they come to you in images. So you use these symbols in order to express what they're talking about. And when you draw the symbols on a stone, you're making the stone divine and sacred, right? You're storing a memory inside the stone. Maybe something wonderful happened here. Maybe you gave birth to a child here, right? Then you commemorate the stone with a symbol. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? So why you're doing this is, well, first of all, you're trying to bring beauty to the world. That's why we humans were created, right? To make this world a more beautiful place, a more imaginative place, to celebrate the divine. We're showing God, or the spirit world, or the underlying soul of reality, okay? We're trying to figure out how the spirit world works inside our reality. The third reason is we're trying to tell a story about who we are, okay? We're trying to combine our imagination together to create society, to create belonging, to create community. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? Sorry.
So you said about human trying to connect with the divine spirits, right? So do they consider...
Okay, sorry. So let me clarify, okay? This is really important. We're not trying to connect with the divine spirit. Why? Because the divine spirit is all around us. We coexist with the divine, okay? Everything around us is divine. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to be in harmony with the divine.
Okay.
Okay, do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay, because in this world, there's no separation between the material and the spiritual. It's all one world together. The spiritual is all around us. But there are certain things that we do in order to reconcile our existence with the spirit world. For example, when we kill an animal, we need to commemorate the animal through paintings and through songs. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good, okay. All right. And even today, we still do this, okay? So let's see examples. This is graffiti, okay, street art. But you can see what's happening where this is Spain, and you can see how beautiful this is.